Good morning. Good to see everybody. Hope you had a good weekend. Good way to start the week off by being here today. It's our study. Begin the word of prayer. John Paul, would you lead some prayer, please? Last 3 weeks or so, we've been talking about in the church instrumental music, what the Bible had to say about it, how God wants us to worship when it comes to our singing. And I mentioned something 2 or 3 weeks ago about this congregation out in Texas that sort of was a mega church and how they were trying to take over other churches and things. And some guy had some interest in that as to how that starts. How does a church get to that condition where another can possibly come in and take it over? And I thought we'd look at that this morning a little bit. May have a lot of time left over when we talk about it, but yet we're going to look at what they have done, how they got to where they were going, where they are right now. But the problem, I think, with a lot of congregations, they wanting to be a lot like the world. There are many within the church who want to be like denominations, and yet that can't be so, but many are wanting to do that. Go to the point that you can't tell one from the other. A lot is taking place when it comes to entertainment. People want to be entertained, and that's what's leading a lot of individuals, a lot of churches in the way that they're going. But the one we're going to look at this morning is the Skillman Church of Christ. That came off their web page, the picture there. If you notice there, it's a large building, a very large building there in Dallas, Texas. It was organized in 1910, and the building you see there was built in 1951. And in 1951, they had approximately 1,200 members that attended. In 2008, they had approximately 700 members. Quite a drastic fall off. And there can be certain things that can maybe cause that. Logistics and this change in the neighborhood and things like that. But that wasn't really the case here, because this particular church building was located in a very prominent part of town, in a very good place. I mean, the property and all that is very high quality property and such. But anyway, that's where they were in 2008, 700 members. Because of the large difference there, when they built the auditorium to where they were in 2008, they remodeled the auditorium, and it will seat somewhere around 650 is what they remodeled it down to. And that took place sometime after 2008 until about the present day. Well, in 2022, guess what their attendance is today? 2022. 1951, 1,200 members. 2008, 700 members. 2022, 80 members. That's what their attendance is. They have around 140-something on the roll, what they have there, but their attendance is around 80 members. You can imagine a 650-seat auditorium, what it would look like with 80 members. And you have to sort of bunch everybody up, I guess, what you have to do. Well, you think with 80 members, guess how many preachers, full-time, paid preachers they have? They got 4. 4 full-time ministers is what they have. How does a church with 80 members have 4 full-time ministers plus the upkeep of this building Upkeep of this building cannot be cheap. The upkeep of this one is pretty expensive at times. Well, somebody at some point years ago left them an endowment, a 7-figure endowment. And that's where all the salaries are being paid coming out of that. And all the church maintenance is coming out of it. So there's where the money is, because a congregation of 80 people couldn't keep that building up, let alone pay salaries for 4 people. There's no way that could happen unless they were some really big givers, those 80 individuals. Well, in 2018, the Skillman Church here decided we're going to start having 2 services. So they're going to have the traditional service, which would be the normal, come and would have singing and prayer and Lord's Supper and a lesson, of course. And then, as we're familiar with that, then they're just going to have the more other type of service that they would have, in which they would bring in the instrument. So they divided up the congregation. I don't know how many, I know about how many, but they're going to have the instruments to come in. That was in 2018, and they did. They had 2 different services. Well, that led to 2 of the elders resigning. They had 6 elders. And because of that, 2 of them resigned. And in their bylaws, that's just bylaws, sometimes bylaws can, if you're not careful, they can supersede the Scriptures, and you never want that. But in their bylaws, they said we had to have at least 4 elders. Well, they were afraid that maybe 2 of the 4, or one of the others fixing to resign, or maybe one old enough and he may die, whatever. They had to do something. So the 4 elders come up with the suggestion, what about a woman elder? What about that? Can we have women elders? And in 2021, they took a survey among the members. How many would we want to, how many would go along with it? And out of their 80 members, approximately 64 said, yeah, we have them. I think it'd be good. Let's have some women elders. So 64 of the 80 decided we want to have women elders. Well, 2 names were brought up to the congregation. One was a man, one was a woman. I don't know how they were going to determine how to go about doing it, but a date was set, and they would have a voice vote. If for this one individual, say yes, or this one say yes, whatever. Well, for whatever reason, that didn't take place. Something about the pandemic came about during that time, and it didn't happen. Well, since the pandemic, they have gotten the services started back, but they decided we're just going to go to 1 service. 2 services aren't going to work. And they decided to cancel the Sunday evening service, and they decided to cancel the Wednesday evening service. So they were basically coming down to just 1 Sunday morning service among 80 people. And the instrument wasn't there, and the women elders weren't in place yet, but that was still the big talk, because they want to be like other churches around them instead of trying to be like what the church that we find in the Bible. So there's Skillman. That's the church that's in Dallas, Texas. Now, another congregation in Dallas, it's the Hills Church of Christ, but they call themselves the Hills Church. They don't like the name Christ or Church of Christ. So they took that out. There's a picture of their location. And this is a mega church. They have at least, on Sunday morning, at least 2,000 people in their service. Mega. Of course, they dropped the name Church of Christ. They just call themselves the Hill Church. Well, they've been expanding, trying to get more and more, people involved, and I probably feel like that they have reached their capacity at this location where they're at here in Dallas. So they expand, and they go to the North Richland Hills. That's a picture up there. I forgot to put the name of the church on top. So they expand, and they go to North Richland Hills, big building, and they're filling it up. So they say, well, we need to expand again. Well, all kind of people want to come. So they go to the West Fort Worth area, and there's a picture of that congregation. All three churches have around 6,000 people on a Sunday morning. You combine all three, and they don't really call themselves a church. They call themselves a campus, like you would a school campus. Well, they call these churches campuses, and they go out and they start a church here. And in this case, 2 other churches they had started. They all teach the same thing as they would. So they have these 3 congregations that have gone out and started these campus churches, and they're filling the buildings up. Well, the Hills Church of Christ, as they call themselves, now just the Hills Church, they get wind of what's happening over in this Skillman Church of Christ, having all this turmoil. And their thinking is, we could use that building. We could take that building. It'll be a good location for us to go again and to set up a merge with that church. And so they get the talking back and forth with the Skillman Church and the Hills Church, and they had to have a legal team. How are we going to do this if it's going to operate? But the problem that came up, the 80 or so members, they didn't want to drop the name Church of Christ, the Skillman Church of Christ. This Hills Church said, if we're going to take it over, it's going to be called the Hills. Well, there was some friction right there. Things weren't going so well. And if they did take over the church, and then all the building and the property was worth $16 million where it's located. That endowment fund that was left to them by somebody, which had been operated under for so long, that would go to the Hills congregation. All that would become their property. And they would need this extra money to remodel. If the Hills took over the Skillman Church, and they were going to have to remodel in order to have it set up to have instruments. I mean, everything that would be in there. Of course, in these mega churches, they have everything. So they have it all set up to have all these instruments. And they have it set up for the lighting, special lighting, everything that would go on in a place like what they would do. So some of the Skillman members said, yeah, some didn't. We want to keep the name. We can't keep the name. So it was decided they would take a vote. They had 140-something on the roll, 80 in attendance, 140-something on the roll, so they decided we're going to take a vote. And if we have two-thirds majority will agree, then we'll merge with the Hills congregation. We'll become the Hills. And we'll drop the name, Skillman Church of Christ. Two-thirds it had to be. So they all meet, and there's about 145 met that day. Somehow you couldn't get 145 members to church, but when they're taking a vote, all of a sudden they come out of the woodwork, show up. So they meet, they vote, and 95 said, let's merge, and 50 said, no, we don't want to merge. Well, they were two votes short of merging, 2 votes. So they decided, well, we're not going to merge. We're going to remain the Skillman Church of Christ, but we're going to change. We're going to change. Even though we're going to carry the name Church of Christ, we're going to have women elders. They came up with that. We're going to expand the role of women within the congregation. Have women teaching mixed groups as far as men and women. They're going to bring in instruments. They're going to bring in lights. And they're going to be more LGBTQ friendly. All this stuff is coming in, what they decided they would do. So they asked one woman who had been a member there for many years. She was an older lady. What do you think about the new proposal, how we want to change things as far as having women elders? And she said, I'm not real fond of having women elders, but probably wouldn't leave over it. It's home to us, and I believe we can do better than we've done. So, I don't know. I don't think it's wrong. I don't like it, but I'm not going to leave because of it. That was her view, and probably the view of several. Now, there were those that, when the vote was taken, whether to leave or to merge or stay the same, there were several of those 95 that voted to leave, to merge, said if we don't merge, then we're going to leave and go somewhere else. Probably go to the hills itself. I don't know how many left because they didn't merge. Maybe they sort of satisfied them when they said, we're going to start doing these things, having the women elders and expanding the role of women and bringing the instruments and all that. Maybe it sort of satisfied them, and many of them didn't leave. But there's how it happens. How it happens sometimes. Not everywhere does it happen that way, but it certainly happened there. Somewhere down the road, somebody lost the respect for the Scriptures somewhere, somehow. Wanted to bring this in and that in. Somewhere they forgot about evangelism. Somehow something went wrong to go from 1,200 members at one point down to 80 members in attendance. Something went wrong somewhere. But it can happen. It can take place. I want us to look at some scriptures here that what the Bible says about certain things. The first one is 2 Timothy 4, 3 and 4. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires. Because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers. And they will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables. Now, Paul's not talking about today's time. He's talking about, hey, even when he's talked about it, it was happening. You had those who would turn away from sound doctrine, even during Paul's time. And really things haven't changed. You have individuals, because of their own desires, itching ears, they're going to do things that's going to be pleasing to them. And they're going to get away from the Scriptures. They want to look more like the world. They want to look more like denominations. And that's the last thing that the Lord is concerned about. The church is to be different. The church is to be a place where you don't go along with the world, in a sense, and you stick to the Scriptures. Another verse, 1 Timothy 1, 3 and 4. I urged you when I went into Macedonia, remain in Ephesus, that you may charge some that they teach no other doctrine, nor give heed to fables and endless genealogies, and disputes which cause disputes rather than godly edification which is in faith. So again, stay away from these things, Paul's telling them. These fables, endless genealogies, and stick with the doctrine. Again, many will tell us that doctrine is not important. They'll tell us that doctrine is that which divides. Stay away from it. Just teach love. Well, love is a great thing. You got to teach it. But you also got to teach the doctrine as well. If not, if all you teach is love, then you're going to go in a bad direction. You're going to go in a way that's not scriptural. Another verse, 1 Timothy 4:13. Till I come, give attention to reading, to exhortation, to doctrine. Give attention to doctrine. 1 Timothy 4, in verse 6 and 7. If you instruct the brethren in these things, you will be a good minister of Jesus Christ, nourished in the words of faith and of good doctrine which you have carefully followed. But reject profane and old wives' fables, and exercise yourself toward godliness. Again, the good doctrine which you have carefully followed. You've got to carefully follow it. And don't reject it and go after this or that. And don't do it. In Titus 1, 13 and 14, this testimony is true. Therefore, rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in faith, not giving heed to Jewish fables and commandments of men who turn from the truth. Rebuke them sharply. Those individuals that are going against the Scriptures, rebuke them. So they will be sound in the faith and not giving heed to these fables or other commandments of men that have gone in the other direction. Some of these, like in the case of the Hills and the Skillman, a lot has to do with what the leadership is about. A lot has to do about the preacher that they get to come in. It's according to where his training comes from. There are a lot of schools that they say are Church of Christ affiliated, but they don't train up properly. Church of Christ in the way of the doctrine we find in the Bible. And some of these preachers will get out and they'll start their own thing and causing problems. The church has somewhat forgotten how to evangelize, especially one generation, the generation that's 40 and under, I guess, because of the, everything's got to be done by text or email, or we have that generation has forgotten how to communicate with people. I'd rather just text and talk that away than one-on-one. And I'm sure there have probably been some good things that come about because of texting and emailing and all the other ways of communicating. But that face-to-face, one-to-one, out there with somebody, visiting with somebody, that goes a long way when it comes to teaching and having an influence. Some have just gotten lazy because that's the easier way to do it. Any thought or comment on any of this morning? Well, they had a legal team. Now, what that consisted of, I don't know. But they had legal people, but a mediator between both of them, trying to work this out. But it didn't work out.
Did the people that had their name on the indebtedness at these congregations, did they get relieved of that when they signed the paper?
Well, they didn't sign. It didn't go through. If they had. I don't know. I don't know how that works.
I'm just wondering how they did it. There's a lot of different ways they could do it.
Yeah.
The essence of it right there.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's got, if they've got a building that's paid for, they got a big asset.
Yeah.
And if they hadn't, they got a big debt. The elder's name, got to pay that plus them. Nobody else paid it. I wonder how they went about getting, talking them into letting them take them over.
I don't know. But there was a legal team. But it didn't work out for them, so who knows? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anything else? All right. We'll take up something next week. We're off the instrumental music. Again, as I said, it was 2005 since we talked about it last. And, so we'll take up another topic next week.